Welcome to week 2 of the Angel Accelerator, and today's topic is due diligence. Now, we've been talking about this topic, for almost every workshop that's been done, almost every single time we get together. I always point out and say, well, you should do that in due diligence. You should do that in due diligence. That's part of due diligence. Well, today I'm going to walk you through in way too much detail what that actually means. In general, from 50,000 feet, due diligence is just answering the question, should I pass on this deal? Should I say no, right? Why should I not make this investment? That's the purpose of due diligence. And I've talked in one of the workshops about the difference between the accelerator model and the venture capital model, and how the venture capital model is all about saying no. It's finding a reason not to invest. And the accelerator model is all about saying yes. Like, this is a company, we can fix it. And they're related, right? You still have to do due diligence in the accelerator model. You just don't go quite as deep, at least to start with. Last week, we talked about what makes for a successful company. And I told you that the answers were timing, luck, and team, right? With more afterwards, right? So there are lots of things that come after that. But by far, the number one thing that makes for a successful startup is timing. And there is nothing you can do to diligence that except listen to what they're saying about what might happen in the future and agree or disagree. There's also nothing you can do about luck. There's nothing in your control. There's no way you can see whether luck is going to come or not. So that leaves us with team and everything else. And we'll actually get to team later. We don't start with the team in the due diligence process. We start with the business plan. And we start with the business plan because that's what they give us first, right? We either see a pitch in an angel group, or we're given a pitch one-on-one, or they're sharing a pitch deck with us, or a one-pager or something like that. So we have a business plan in front of us, and just it's too hard to flip back and forth. So just picture a business plan you've seen before. First question you should have, right? First thing that should be in that plan is, what problem are they solving? It's one of my pet peeves in the tech world. You often get an app that such and such, which is describing a solution, never telling you why this app is important. In a real pitch deck, a good pitch deck, you get the problem first and foremost. So they'll give you a problem. It might be that there's climate change coming. And then their solution is this tiny little solution that, makes your life just a tiny bit better and doesn't use any energy. Well, the problem then doesn't really match the solution. The scale of the problem doesn't match the scale of the solution. And that's kind of a yellow flag. We brought about yellow flags in a workshop before. Why are they talking about this gigantic problem? Why are they talking about poverty and then they save you $1, right? There's a mismatch there. So you got to keep your eye open for that as you get from problem to solution. When they talk about their solution, does it work? Do you understand how it works? Are they providing you enough information so that you can say, okay, I can see how that solves that problem? And can you see why some customer would say, yes, I'll buy that solution? If you don't see those, then they're not doing a good job with their business plan. And then you can say, well, maybe there's an issue with the team. Maybe the team doesn't understand what they do. Maybe the team is trying to pull something over on you, or maybe they're just not good at writing. It's up to you to continue the due diligence to figure that out or pass. Do you understand how they make money? This is a very common one for them to skip. They'll tell you why they're doing it, and they'll tell you what they're doing, and then they won't tell you how anybody pays. They don't tell you whether they pay a monthly fee or an annual subscription, or whether they buy it once, or whether someone else is paying, or whether it sits on a retail shelf. Like, it's just missing from the business model. Sometimes it's just assumed that like if it's a media company or an app, it just may be assumed that it's freemium, or maybe assumed that it's ad-based. And it may be assumed when we're talking about African food companies that you sell the food and people just buy it. But it's much better when they're explicit and they tell you, we have 2 channels we're selling through. One's directly to these kind of customers, and one is through just distributors. Then they should be telling you something about the finances. Ideally, we'll talk about financial models in a bit, but ideally, they're giving you some historic numbers to look at. And so basically you're looking at, are they going up 50% year over year? Is it steady? Is it noisy? Is it 50%? Is it 100% per year? Are they tripling per year? If you continue those projections forward, do they suddenly have a kink in the curve because they wanted to make it a hockey stick? Do those projections look reasonable? I clearly remember one of the red flags that popped up in my life. I was at an angel group in Seattle. Some company was pitching, they made something to help you change truck tires. It was a physical product. And their future projections were like $1 million, $40 million, $200 million in the next 3 years. Well, that looks totally unreasonable. And yet they were up on stage wasting my time in an angel group. And so, you get to put in feedback on the angel group forums. I got to put in that feedback. In terms of not just the numbers, you should also be looking at the margins. And this is something I've seen most entrepreneurs don't know. They don't know how to compute a margin. They don't know how to talk about net margins and gross margins. They don't show them. You need to see that. You need to push them. Due diligence is about asking questions. You need to ask them, okay, let's see your financial model. Let's compute your net margins and your gross margins. Let's see if those look reasonable. And let's compute them for the next bunch of months or next bunch of quarters or next bunch of years. Let's see if those are steadily growing or staying steady or shrinking or noisy. And if they are, then something's going wrong. All right, who else is solving this problem? Is there actually room in the market for this company to be created, right? We're talking about startups. If there's no room in the market, if they're bringing forth fizzy, sugared, brownish water to drink as a beverage, you got to question, well, why? Why are they going after that market? It seems like there's no space in that market. They're supposed to show you a competitive matrix or a magic square to help explain the competition to you, to help you see that they understand the competition, not necessarily go through all the detail. And so it's up to you to ask enough questions to make it clear or not whether or not they really understand what's going on in the competition. One of the cliches out there is for an entrepreneur to say, no one else is solving this problem. Well, that's a mistake, because if that's true, one of two things is wrong. Either the customers don't care about the problem, which is why no one is solving it, which means they'll have no customers, or the customers don't care about the problem. It's just not high enough on their priority list that they even bother to solve the problem, in which case they'll have no customers. It's really rare that you come across such an amazing novel idea that there is no true competition, because it's never been done before. No one's ever seen a solution to this problem before. It's exceedingly rare. Okay. Moving on to opportunity size. This is a big one. We talked about this at Fledge 16 a bit today. What you'll see is when you see a great pitch, somewhere in the early part of the pitch, they'll show you a giant number. And I teach them to do this because it's important to do this. So somewhere in there is a giant number that talks about how big an opportunity this is. And ideally, when we do it right in terms of teaching the entrepreneurs, they're going to come up with $1 billion number somehow. $1 billion number that matches their market. Right? It's up to you guys as investors to question, how did you get that number? Where did that number come from? Walk me through the logic that got me from 330 million Americans or 7.5 billion people down to this multi-billion-dollar number. And then what I teach the entrepreneurs to do is to also do a number from the bottom up to say, okay, well, if that's the giant opportunity out there, how much can you actually get? Don't just wave your hands and say it's 1%, because that's a cliche and that's false. But actually build up from the bottom in a financial model and say, well, how big of this opportunity can I grab realistically in the next 3, 4, 5 years? You should be asking them the same thing. All right, next biggie up there is the cost of acquiring customers. One way that startups die really often is that they underestimate the cost of getting a new customer. They usually think, I'll just put up some ads, I'll run some radio ads or some Google ads or some Facebook ads or even some flyers these days in some markets, and the customers will just show up. And what they don't understand is that it takes an enormous amount of marketing to get any customers to even know that your even know that your company exists. And it takes way longer than you think as an entrepreneur to actually close one of those customers. So if we're talking about companies that are already up and running with customers, which we generally are, then they should know, how long does it take to get a customer? If it's an online business, they should be able to track first visit to purchases. If it's an in-person business, they should understand how many times did they talk to this potential customer until they said yes? How long was that on the calendar? And what did that look like last year? Is that process going faster and faster? Is the cost going lower and lower? Or is it staying the same? If it's staying the same, why? Why is it not speeding up? Why are they not getting more efficient as they understand customers better? One of the things we see a lot is that the first batch of customers happen really quickly, really cheaply, because those are the people they already knew. Those are the people in their little black book. And now they've run out of those, and now they're finding out what the true cost of customers are, and it's much, much higher. Last one on this list is the ask. So when you see a pitch deck, the last slide should be an ask. When you're reading a one sheet, it should be at the bottom. And the ask is, how much money are they raising? What are the terms? What are they going to do with it? And so again, you got to ask yourself, as due diligence, does that match? Here's a company, I was just talking to one of the fledglings in office hours. They did $94,000 in business last year. They said they were talking to an investor, and that investor likes to write checks of $250,000. I said, that's great, but you know what? I really doubt that that investor is going to invest in your company in this next 12 months, pandemic aside, because you're just not ready for $250,000. You did 94 last year. Maybe an investor will give you 150. Ask for 100, it's much more likely. Ask for less than 100, it's a lot easier for them. There's just fewer investors that do less than 50, professional investors. And so you got to match the size of the company with the size of the check. Same thing with the terms. They should be telling you, as angels, what you're going to see is that the terms are set on that ask page. You don't get to negotiate those. You're really only your choice is yes or no. If you're coming in as an angel group, you might be able to change some of the terms. Or if you're writing a very big check, you can change some of the terms or try. But typically, the way it works is that startups set the terms when they're raising around with angels. And when they're raising around with a venture capital fund, they'll put a range of valuations on there, and then the venture capital fund sets the terms. Last on here is, what's the milestones look like? If they don't tell you what they're going to do with the money, then you got to ask. It's a yellow flag that they didn't tell you. If they're telling you that they're going to use this money for 2 or 3 years, that's a yellow flag or a red flag. Shows they don't know how to do this. Investors invest for the next 12 to 18 months. If they want more money beyond that or need more money beyond that, that's fine. They can ask for that, but they have to ask for it in chunks, and it comes in 12 to 18 month chunks. So if they're saying they're going to raise $200,000 now, they have to show how they're going to use the $200,000 in the next 12 to 18 months, or even 12 to 15 months. Show what they're going to do with it, show what it's going to do to their business, and then they can tell you, and then we're going to go and ask you for more money and ask other investors for more money next year.